If you've lived in the Conejo Valley even just for a couple of years, chances are you already know today's guest. KyleJorry spent nearly 2 decades shaping local journalism in the Conejo Valley as a reporter for the Acorn and then editor-in-chief of the Thousand Oaks Acorn, reporting on the moments that define our community. But after 18 years of newsrooms and deadlines, he made a bold pivot, joining 507 Coffee to open their Boulevard location. And then, more recently, he pivoted to the nonprofit world, joining Hospice of the Conejo as Executive Director. In this conversation, we talk about the power of local storytelling, career reinvention, and what it means to serve people during the most human moments of their lives. This is a conversation about purpose, community, and knowing when it's time to turn the page. Please enjoy my lengthy conversation with KyleJorry. If you enjoy this episode and find value in the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and rating. This helps more people find the podcast, and therefore each story can reach more folks in the Conejo Valley. Our second annual Female Founders event is on March 24th. Have you gotten your ticket yet? If not, go to Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram, send me a DM, and I'll send you the link to RSVP. At the event, I'll be interviewing some of the incredible female founders of your favorite local businesses. Whether you want to connect with others, learn how to launch and grow a business, or simply take a break from your kids, the second annual Female Founders event is for you. So, if you want to join us this year, send me a DM at Conejo Valley Visionaries, and I will send you the link to get your ticket. I hope to see you on March 24th at our second annual Female Founders event. Kyle, welcome to Conejo Valley Visionaries.
Thank you so much for having me on. Excited to be here.
I am thrilled to have you on. As I mentioned earlier, I have had several people throughout the past 2 years of this podcast tell me you have to speak to KyleJorry. You have to have him on the podcast, whether it be through your 507 connections or through the Acorn. So you finally agreed. And I am so glad to not only hear about your journey here in the Conejo Valley, but also just like pick your brain about all things kind of like Conejo Valley related. So I hope you're open to that. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome, and absolutely open. As someone who had to be on the other side of this conversation, I want to be completely transparent and answer any questions you have. So hopefully I live up to all those kind words people have said about me.
Yeah, and we should say, that's right. You are a fellow podcaster during your time at the Acorn. You did start a podcast there. So no pressure on me, but we will do our best to navigate this together. So what we like to do on this podcast, Kyle, is start at the beginning. Where did you grow up and what did you want to be as a kid?
So that, believe it or not, that's a little bit of a complex question for me. I was a military brat. My dad was an Army officer. So grew up all over. My parents are originally from the Northeast, but I lived in Leavenworth, Kansas, Germany, Saudi Arabia. So kind of moved all around as a young person. And so when people say, like, what's your hometown? That's not an easy question for me to answer because, I moved around so much. And in fact, now California is the state I've been in the longest. But yeah, growing up, I was that total sports nerd, loved everything sports, football, basketball, baseball. So as embarrassing as it is to say, there was a time there where I thought I would go be a professional football player. And those dreams ended quickly about the, I want to say, middle school. Figured out that wasn't in the cards for me. But yeah, that was my passion. And that was kind of my foray into journalism. When I figured out, I wasn't going to be going anywhere in sports, I had a guy that I looked up to say, hey, you love sports. You can still get involved. You can write about and cover sports and still get to be a part of them. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door in journalism.
Wow, that's so interesting. And that happened in middle school, or was that later in life?
Oh, yeah. So that would be in high school. So, yeah, I played sports until high school in a small town called Newcastle, Wyoming. That's where my parents ended up retiring to or moving us to. And that's where I got my foot in the door, a town of 3,000 people. So I wouldn't have been able to do this in a larger city. But it was a small local paper, well respected. And the guy hired me on the spot. He knew I was a writer and said, hey, why don't you just come in and write about, our mascot was the Dogie. I don't know if you've ever, Dogie.
Okay.
That's a motherless calf, for those not ranching familiar.
No.
Cover the Dogie basketball team. And that was my first job, like professional writing job.
That's incredible. But it sounds like you mentioned you liked writing before that. So were you writing stories or kind of doing your own?
Yeah. I was that creative writer. I was that kid when they gave an assignment to like do a 3-page story, fantasy story. I wrote like Lord of the Rings trilogy style, 10 pages long. Just, I guess, enjoyed putting pen to paper before the days of computers. And so that was always something I was interested in from the time I was in elementary school, probably. So it's that's kind of stuck.
And in this role, how fun that you were actually working for the local newspaper, not like your high school newspaper.
Yeah.
What was it like? Were you going and obviously you were going to like cover these games? You were there. Like, what did you learn from those early days in journalism?
Yeah, it was really fascinating. So again, it started with just covering high school sports, basketball, track, and it grew into the ability to. The next summer, they actually hired me as an intern to cover general news again in this community. So it was your county board, your city council, city manager. And it was quite again, being a young person and walking into a room and saying, I'm here to interview you. There was a lot of strange looks I would get and saying, are you sure? What's this kid doing in front of me? And I always just had to say, hey, I'm with the newsletter Journal, and I'm just, here to get the facts straight. So it was really eye-opening. And from that time, I just loved the ability to get information for the public, get it from the people that are in power. And even in a small town of that size, you have people that, whether it's the sheriff or the police chief, that are powerful in making decisions, and they have to be answerable to the paper. And I guess I kind of dug that power that, hey, you've got to answer these questions because I'm from such and such a outlet. And I just enjoyed that and found a way to be creative in my writing. I mean, journalism is so different than that fantasy writing I talked about growing up with, but it gave me an opportunity to be an outlet to write professionally. And then I just enjoyed chasing news stories. So I was covering the county fair, 4-H. We had a refinery in town. That was a lot of big news.
Yeah. What was like was there any major news story that you remember that was either salacious or like it took over the news?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was a train that ran through town, and you would literally be like driving through town. All of a sudden, the arms come down, and you're sitting there for 5-10 minutes. People just kind of got used to it. But there was a group of residents that lived near the tracks that finally came to the council and said, this is obstructing our way of life. It's so loud. And I covered that. And there were a lot of people that were upset about that, but it ultimately led to a law that was passed that said the trains that passed through Newcastle couldn't, let their whistles go at a certain hour of time. And so that's where I saw where, you can fight City Hall. And if you speak up and you have an issue and you make a good case, that you can change things. So that was my first experience with seeing, the public having a power like that.
And so you could have maybe gone two ways, sticking with journalism or maybe going into city government. It sounds like those opportunities. I know you went into journalism, but was there some part of you that liked the idea of being part of the people of power in the city?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, again, they've got a really thankless job. I'll be honest, especially in a town of that size. But even in a town like Thousand Oaks, it's on them. They're elected to serve in these roles, and most of the times they get attention is when they do something wrong or when people are upset. So I saw very on, like, I don't know if I want to sit on that side of things. I was more comfortable asking the questions, holding feet to the fire. So yeah, no interest in politics or even city government, just loved journalism and thought, hey, let's see where we can take this.
Okay. So you went to Pepperdine to study journalism?
Yeah, I did. It was funny. I started my first semester, I actually went for international business, and I immediately found out, like, no, wearing a suit and showing up, this isn't for me. So I immediately went down to the paper at the time. It's called The Graphic. They had a little trailer on campus and said, hey, sign me up. Can I write? Can I cover something? And immediately they threw me into covering student government at Pepperdine. And that led into a sports role there and then covering news. Studied under an amazing professor, Michael Jordan, Dr. J, of course, he went by. Just getting to learn, even at that time, just how critical journalism was. He was that professor that, not just taught you how to do it, because journalism is very much learn as you go. It's hard to do it in a classroom, but just inspired us, like, this is how important it is. Had us believing, like, oh, surgeons are important, but wait to see what a journalist can do. And just kind of reinforce all these ideas of, like, okay, this is a career I can be proud of and really make a difference in. And it's not a doctor or a lawyer, but it's something I can, because that was always important to me, just that I did some kind of role where I had an impact and made a difference. So.
I studied journalism and starting in 2001. And back then, the online journalism was the first time in 2001 that was like introduced in the curriculum. Were you working on online journalism at all back then? It was a big hubbub. I was at USC and it was this whole big deal. Online journalism, we have to do it, but it's never going to last. I mean, that is how crazy that is so long ago. I'm just curious, like, what your experience was like in your journalism program.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was coming on board right when I think they had created a website for the graphic where you would take all your stories you put in the paper that came out once a week on Thursdays, and you would just upload it to the website. You know, it wasn't like any straight to online stories when I started. By the time I left, we were, yes, taking advantage of a website to break news, put
Oh,
up
cool.
stories as they were happening. But the bigger change that happened right after I left was at that point, there was a really big separation between here, the TV journalists and the radio folks. They're on the other side of the hall, and we didn't mess with them. They were they were like the actors, the good looking students, well put together, and they're going to be on TV and radio. And then the print journalists, we took ourselves, didn't take ourselves as seriously. But after I left there, they started to break those walls down and realize that, hey, even as a print journalist or a newspaper journalist, you've got to be able to take video. Got to be able to record your voice. That was the big change that happened right after I left. Unfortunately, I missed that training. And within a few years, you started to see with social media reporters turning the camera back on themselves or turning them on people. So that very much changed right around the time I was leaving. But unfortunately, didn't get a lot of that really in-depth education and building a website, doing a news site. I was still kind of that dinosaur newspaper print person. And in fact, when I started at the Newsletter Journal in Wyoming, we would develop film. It was before digital cameras. So I was in a dark room developing film, and you'd have these little devices where you can look through the slide and say, oh, it looks like a good shot. I think that's good. And you would scan it and put it on the computer. And it was so much work. You thought about, if I shot 100 photos, I got to develop 100 photos. And so that was one of the other bigger changes, was just suddenly digital cameras. And you were like, wow, I can just shoot all I want, like just keep clicking away. Right. And that all happened. So it was definitely a pivotal time in journalism when I was going to Pepperdine.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And it is, a lot has changed in media over the past 5 years, but in that 20-year range, it was definitely a big shift. And it is interesting that just the move to online journalism and the need to put so much out at all times, the constant need for content was a moment of shift at that point.
Huge, absolutely.
So where was your first gig after college?
So I was, I thought I had interned at the Ventura County Star, which in those days, people don't remember. I mean, it was a really big deal around here. You had the Los Angeles Times, which was, of course, top of the heap. And then you had the Ventura County Star that had, won a Pulitzer and was very well respected, and it's a huge staff and covered all the cities across Ventura County. So I had interned there, I want to say my junior year at Pepperdine, and I thought, hey, I can do this. I can write news. I can walk right out of Pepperdine and get a job at the Star. And I went to see them probably within a few weeks of graduation, and they said, no, sir, like, we don't hire journalists right out of college. You're going to have to go to a smaller mid-sized daily, get some training there, and then you can apply. And I remember just being like hurt and just shocked. Like, I think I can do this. Like, I've seen my work. I feel like I'm ready. But that was what they told me. So I was dating someone at the time and wasn't really excited about the idea of leaving. And she was going to Pepperdine, and I wasn't excited about leaving. So I'm like, what can I do? And when I was in college, I lived in Agora Hills. A lot of Pepperdine students that live on campus. We actually move off campus. I would get this little paper in my driveway, and we were one of those worst offenders where we would just build up like 10 papers, and the neighbors probably hated us. But
it happens,
Yeah. I was aware of the Acorn, and there's a gal named Lori Porter. I want to shout her out. Lori Porter, the reporter. She came and spoke at Pepperdine and told me about the Acorn, and I said, I'll give this a shot, and maybe I'll stick around for a couple of years, and then when I'm ready to go work for a larger daily. But I ended up getting a foothold as the sports editor there.
Yeah.
And basically, other than one brief exit for a little bit to go work for a sports and fitness magazine, I ended up staying there for 17 years. So right out of Pepperdine to the Acorn, and kind of never left.
That is incredible. That, folks, does not happen very often, that you would stay at one place for that long. And especially, at a newspaper that has been around for that long too. The fact that the Acorn is still going is also really impressive. So being able to do both of those things. And it's funny because I was the broadcast journalism person, and I despise the idea of having to go to a small town to build up my reel. And that's when I pivoted away from journalism. So good for you for sticking with it. Yeah. And that Thousand Oaks or this area being your first gig is very cool and so important. One of the things that I think about when I think with this podcast and and it is nice that the Acorn is around because it is a smaller area, and to have an actual local newspaper is really great. But just the lack, because we're in this in between of Los Angeles and then Central Coast, like there's just not a lot of media outlets out here that cover all the amazing things that happen here. And that, I'm grateful that the Acorn is here, but that is something that I think is maybe in your role, being able to see that there's this desire to have very local news told here, because we're not LA, we're not Santa Barbara, but there are, great and interesting things happening in the area. Was that your experience when you first
Yeah,
joined?
I mean, there's I could go on this subject a lot. I've thought about this a lot. I mean, I was able to realize right away, and again, there was this stigma about a free newspaper, a throwaway, a rag, whatever they would call it. But then once you go there, and I would start to write, and especially when I went from sports into news, to see the response that I would get to my stories. I mean, I think that's what any reporter wants. They don't want to be shouting into the void and no one's reading their work. I immediately picked up on, and I didn't really realize this when I went there. Literally, it was just like a job and I can stay close to where I was living, that people read the Acorn religiously, even in the hard copy at that time. And so I was like, wow, this is really neat. I can enjoy this. And then there was this feeling that, that even as a smaller paper, like we could compete with the big guys. Like once social media came about and the website, because when I started there, it was, again, a true weekly paper, meaning if you got a great scoop or you had a great story, you basically had to sit on it for a week, and that affected how you wrote and everything. I remember when the big train crash happened in Simi Valley, that was when we were still not putting in any stories that weren't in that week-long cycle. And so I think the train crash happened on a Friday and we had to wait a week to cover it. And you adjusted to that. You just change how you did your reporting. But as soon as I found out, wow, we have a website that I can post to anytime I want. And I can go on Twitter and I can share any story I want in real time. I just saw no, we can, we were always embedded in the community more so than some of these larger papers, especially as they pulled back, especially as they've reduced staff. Like I always would say to my team, they're like, no, we are the boots on the ground in Thousand Oaks. All these other reporters, they're coming and visiting, but we're here. So once I realized like we can leverage that to own the news cycle, when there is a big story, be there first, have it first, and break stories all the time. Like that just changed my idea of how I looked at the Acorn, and I just found it a thrill to like be that underdog. And maybe it's because I was from a small town, maybe because that editor turned me down for that job. I mean, it was like a time like we can really let's really turn, because I don't think people read us, but I don't think we were respected early on. We were mostly seen as like squirrel of the month and pet of the week and those vacation photos. But I was like, no, like we have the talent, we have the abilities to be like a really respected news source. And I just kind of kept chasing that dream through my time there. And they're always up to a point felt like we could get better and grow. And, at some point, like we just hit that dream state where like we had all the eyes of the community on us. We had a great team of reporters, amazing photographers. I was just like, I'm really happy here. Now I've moved to home. I moved into my home here. So now I'm covering the community. Yeah. So it was really great. I mean, like I said, I never intended to stick around that long, but to be able to work for an independent paper, locally owned, I don't know.
That is, I mean, I think talk about like, that's part of, I think, one thing about journalism, and not to get too like behind the curtain on this, but like the idea when I was in college studying journalism and for probably the decade after, there's a real divide between like church and state advertisers versus, journalism. And talk about a huge change in the past 5 years with affiliate programs and all of these ways that I think the sort of casual reader doesn't understand how much like money is influencing what is featured. I'm not saying that for the Acorn, but in a lot of what we read online, there's affiliate links. That's all sort of monetary, there's money that's going where when we were studying journalism, you would never like be able to interact with the media buyer or the advertiser. And I think that's also true, obviously, with the changing landscape of just print media in general. Like it has shrunk so much because it costs a lot of money to print these things and to invest in it. And so the fact that, and so many of these papers and magazines are now owned by a conglomerate and, are getting syndicated content. So to know that the Acorn is still independently owned is really impressive.
Well, I mean, I should say right after I left, it's been sold. So it is no longer independently
owned. Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying.
I'll be honest, like if people that have followed the paper for the last 20 years, they'll notice a difference from 2 years ago, 3 years ago until now. And that And we used to really stress like independent, locally owned. And I don't know if people know what that meant, but what that meant was that, again, we were able to control what content we wanted. There wasn't some major office in Phoenix or where else sending you, say, you need to cover this, or advertisers saying, oh, I got a new account. Will you write about so-and-so? Now, we still had those discussions, and there was this constant like pushback, and sometimes we would give in. I mean, that did go on, but we were in control of our own destiny, and our owners, we were just blessed to have owners that were disinterested, because so many people, when you do have independent papers, they buy them because they have a political agenda or they have a business they're trying to back. I mean, for any of the reasons people will take and own a paper, Jim and Lisa Rule, to all their credit, they kind of stayed out of it and let us do our thing. And I just realized, like, this is unique.
Yeah.
It's non-corporate, and they just, they let us do our things. And especially me would sometimes push the boundaries. And every once in a while, I know they got a call of some angry reader or some angry city official saying, what's this guy doing? You gotta lasso him. And they would have my back. Now, there would be times where they would check me, but most of the times they would have my back. And so that was really unique. And I guess I figured that out. And I didn't want to give that up. I've been a lot of the larger papers. I know that I would be sacrificing some of that. So it was neat and it was unique. And when I left, I had no idea they were going to sell the paper. And I know they had a reason to do that. But now that it's not locally owned, it's just, it's changed. And you hit the nail on the head. Is there's just less and less, and it's expensive not only to print a paper, but to do good journalism.
To run it, to pay people to do that.
At a meeting, they would say, oh, you have 2 hours to cover the meeting. I would say it's a 5-hour meeting. You have to be there. You can't suddenly get up and, if any news happens after then, I'm gone. So that kind of journalism, it's costly. And so the whole industry, right around the time that you and I were getting out of college, like, unfortunately, they didn't foresee the internet and Google, and Craigslist was really the death knell, because all that real estate and those classifieds, we've just never been able to make up that money that was lost. And now we see it trying with paid subscribers, and that's the only way to do it. And people get frustrated with paywalls. I hear all the jabs and jokes, but I would say, like, if you really want to have good local journalism, you're going to have to pay for it yourself. And so it's hard to do it any other way. So it's, I keep up with the industry now. I love talking about it. I'll admit I'm sad to see, what's happened to some of our local outlets, because stories are getting missed. And I know it because I covered this area for years. And like you said, there's so much to write about here, and it just can't be done with one or two people.
Totally. I get it. I know. I want to go back to this, but I was just going to share that even from this is so silly, but like as a gift guide, that's not a local, we don't focus on local businesses. It's a syndicated gift guide here. And it's like, but we're in a place where there's lots of amazing local makers or businesses who could be featured in it. And I always think that's sad, but as you said, it's part of the changing landscape. Okay, let's go back to your time at the Acorn, though. You were there, you started off as a sports reporter, then you moved into news, and then you moved into the editor-in-chief role.
Yeah. So I should say we have for those that know, the Acorn was 5 separate papers. When I started there, it was 3, and then we added it was 2, Simi Valley, Moore Park, and Camarillo. So really we were kind of, each paper had its own editor. And for the smaller papers, one editor would cover 2 of them. So I actually started, the first editorship I had was in Simi Valley. I was like 24 years old, handed over the paper, the keys to the city of Simi Valley, which is a fascinating town with a great history. And again, that engaged community, people involved with their sports or schools. So I loved my time in Simi Valley and Moore Park. And then when, I want to say around 2010, Steve Holt, who was the editor of the Thousand Oaks Acorn, which was the largest paper, he retired, and I had the opportunity to take over the Thousand Oaks Acorn, which gets kind of confusing, but the Acorn is like Agora Hills, Calabasas, Westlake, LA County, and then Thousand Oaks is all East Conejo Valley, Newbury Park. And so I had a chance to take that paper over, and I mean, it was just, like I said, a dream come true to get to cover the largest city in the news chain and have a big staff of 2 reporters covering school board, park board, city hall, all the crime stuff. And, it was just from the get-go, it was like, what can we cover? What can we not cover? And throughout that time, it was just amazing. I want to say I was 12 years as editor there, almost 13. And we just covered all kinds of big stories, kind of culminating, obviously on a sad note, but culminating in the Borderline shooting and what happened there, the Woolsey fire, But I always think about like those first 8 years was kind of preparing us for that moment. Like, could we always said we can cover anything, like we're up for anything, our little paper. And then suddenly when this massive story hit, and I thought, well, let's see if we can really do it. We were ready at that time to cover what was obviously a terrible incident, and that in fact it impacted so many people in our community. But as difficult a time that was, like, that is certainly the work I'm most proud of that we put out.
Yeah, gosh, and to think it all happened in 1 week, what a crazy
Yeah.
moment, especially, you said a staff of 2 reporters and, being able to get out there and be able to cover it in a way that was useful for the community is
I
really
tell
important.
people that was also an election week. So on top of the shooting and then the fire, we had just finished covering an election. So that night when it happened, I told the story that the LA Times was kind enough to do a little write up, but that night that it happened, both my reporters, like, they were asleep. So when the news broke, I left my house here in Thousand Oaks and drove down to Borderline, which was only 5 minutes away. And here I'm the editor trying to cover this massive national story. And that next day, like, my reporters woke up to this horrible news. But they all rallied and they did most of the coverage going forward. But that's kind of how it was. First person available to cover it. And that night, it just so happened it was me. And that's again, I'm glad it was me. I'm glad I was ready in that spot. It was difficult, and it was, we learned really quickly, like, the victims, we knew victims, or we knew friends or families of victims. It was amazing how that started to kind of come out. And even one of my reporters, I think the second night, he learned that one of the victims was a friend of his, and that hit him in real time. So it was emotional. It was trying for our staff, but we just felt this great responsibility. Like, we've got to be the ones that tell the story and tell it in a way which we always did, which was to kind of take into account that these are local people with real lives and had a real impact. And the CNN, all the global reporters coming in, like, they were going to have a different approach to it than we did. We followed through on that. And it was very rewarding, and to see the way the community responded to us. Because of the coverage that we did. Because 2 years later, when COVID hit and the paper was in real financial trouble, we put out a call to the residents saying, hey, can you support us and just donate to us like we're a nonprofit? And people really came and backed us. And I think a lot of it had to do with the work we did during Woolsey and after Border.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh, I know. I mean, talk about, like, it is to that point of, like, the outside of LA Times or these bigger areas where, they're covering a huge city. And to think about how this is so local, and the fact that it, is impacting your life, it is impacting not only the residents, but the people covering it, is a really interesting, like, it's a good framing of it, and, like, shows to have that really local perspective and keeping the community in mind.
Yeah, we had to keep in mind, like, we're going to keep being here and we have to live here. And so we had to approach every story with this ethical look at, like, hey, we're not going to be salacious. We don't need to give every detail. And people expected that of us, to their credit. And I think I should give Dawn Megley, she was my amazing reporter at the time. She's sadly no longer in journalism, but also Becca Whitnall, who's the editor of the Acorn, and Ian Bradley, who was there. I mean, they just did fabulous work. And because they were from here, I'm not actually from here, but a lot of them grew up here. So they had that extra added responsibility to cover this in a way that was respectful to the victims, to their families, and the survivors. So it was amazing to see.
Okay, this is a sort of strange transition, so pardon me. But before we jump to your next career jump, our mutual friend Drew Pletcher, who's been on the podcast before,
Nice.
and who helped connect me to you ultimately, he mentioned or asked me to ask you about a particular headline that I guess you're famous for. I don't know if you're going to know what I'm talking about, but apparently about maybe when there was a Hooters that was closing in Thousand Oaks or in the area. I would love to know what the headline was, if you feel comfortable sharing it. And
Oh my gosh. I wish you'd let me know. I'm sure we had a lot of fun with headlines. Let's just say that, I mean, when you write as many headlines as I had to over a 17-year career, and you just kind of get on a late night on a Wednesday and you're trying to get the paper out of the door and you want to do something that's going to grab attention. Yes, I would say when Hooters when it first opened, what a big deal was. And people do not understand, like, it was one of the biggest stories that I first tackled, and it was unbelievable the reaction to this. Just a
When it
restaurant.
opened.
When it opened,
Okay.
people were furious. Like, not in our town. We won't
Right.
have this here. Like, every other restaurant that opens, there's not a hearing. They just apply for a permit. They go where a restaurant goes. But this one, there was such outcry about it that the city council itself had to have a meeting in the planning commission that the public could come and speak against it. And it ended up not being a big deal. And then it closed a few years later. But
I can tell you what the headline is. It is a good one.
Okay, tell me.
Okay, former Hooters could be flattened.
So that was when it closed. Yeah.
Yes, June 2019. Yeah, I think that's the one he was referencing.
Headlines are tricky. Sometimes.
Yeah, what's the process of that? I'm curious. Thinking about social media with AI and everything in terms of like creating content. Back then, you were using your own creative juices to write all of that.
Yeah, you want to we always kept in mind we're a family newspaper.
Okay.
We're not some of these other papers, so we kept that in mind who our readership was. But yeah, you wanted to be able to have a little fun and I used to think of it like, hey, we're on the driveway, and I imagine me stepping over the paper every day. What might be that headline that one day I'm like going to pick up that paper and throw it in the trash, and I look at it and I go, Hooters flattened? What's going on here? And that's that one thing that gets you to pick it up and read it, and suddenly you're like, wow, and there's a lot in here. Maybe I'll look at it. So that's kind of how I looked, especially at the front page headlines. But a lot of it was just for our own entertainment. We would sitting there around as a staff, kicking around different headline ideas.
Yeah.
A lot of them luckily never made it out of the, landed on the cutting room floor. Yeah. For good reason. And then sometimes you saw it on the page and you're like, wait a second. That didn't read exactly how I wanted. And every once in a while you had one that really knocked out of the park where it didn't, maybe it offended some people, but for most people they had a good laugh at it and knew not to take it too seriously. But you had to gauge the story. I mean, of restaurants closing, we could take a little more risk with that headline than in others. But yeah, it was weird again, because I came from a time before social media. You wanted to have on the front page of the paper really mattered in those days, because that maybe was the only thing people saw and read, and it's changed so much now that links get shared and maybe people don't see the headline. But yeah, we spent a lot of time kicking around headlines to grab people's attention, and sometimes you knocked out the park, and other times you saw it and you're like, what was I thinking? Maybe I just didn't get enough sleep.
That one's going in the trash.
Yeah. Or let's say, or it was in the paper and you had to answer for it. I mean, right. I'm glad Drew can laugh about that one, but I'm sure I got a couple calls saying, you're better than this guy.
Letters to the editor.
Yeah. You kept us accountable. That was for sure. People took a lot of ownership over the paper, which I enjoyed, but it made it sometimes when you did something, made an error or something went sideways, you would hear about it. Calls and emails. Yeah.
I imagine. Okay. So, you said you were editor-in-chief for around 12 years at the Acorn, and then you sort of, I don't know, maybe surprisingly made a pivot and left the paper, left your journalism background or career, and moved over to 507, which also huge fans of here on the podcast, to join as a operations lead director. So tell us about how you made that jump, or why.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of people have asked me, and I got a lot of sideways looks at the time. And it's not one factor. It was multiple things. Some things that are extremely personal, and some things that was really just I'd been there a long time, and I was looking for a change. But I can say, I'm a Christian. I was born again in like 2021, and there were some priorities in my life that I just, I don't know, not that it's incompatible being a believer and being a newspaper editor. Certainly it is, and many do it. But yeah, your some of your motivations and your things that drive you change a little bit. So that had some factor in it. The factor was also that, I just felt like some of the challenge the industry was going through, and Jim and Lisa were very good to me, but we just weren't able to keep good staff. And that was tough. I saw a lot of good reporters go out the door that, and it was really hard to get new talent when, you could only pay what we were paying. So that was part of it. And then just the long hours, and it's absolutely no knock on the owners of the Acorn. I did it to myself. Like I kind of got caught up in the Twitter, the social media, being not only the news guy, but I would have opinions and hot takes. And it just got to be we built it up so that people were constantly wanting us to be at every story, on top of everything that was going on, so that on the weekends, on holidays, on vacation, my wife's like, why are you on your phone? We're in wine country. And I'm like, well, there's a story breaking, I gotta be on. So there was some pressure there, her saying like, is this best for you? Like, has this become so much a part of your life? You weren't getting paid more for that. You were just doing that because you thought you had to.
Yeah.
So that was another factor. And then, I think and then I will say, I mean, this is probably true. I mean, some of the politics that came on later in my career, one of the things that was really neat in my whole career was in local journalism, whether it was in Newcastle, Wyoming, whether it was at the Graphic or was at the Acorn. You avoided some of that real nasty partisan stuff that went on because you covered nonpartisan offices, whether it was a city council or the board of supervisors. Yes, we covered some state races where you had political party affiliations, but early in my career, like, it was never this look at like, is Kyle a conservative? Is Kyle a Democrat? Like, what angle? He must be biased, because again, it was all about like, is this oak tree going to get cut down? Is this new project going to be good for the city? Like, those were the big debates.
Right.
And we were still criticized if we didn't cover a story in a certain way, but it just like I don't know. I would say there was like a school board race where it got very political on a very local level. And when people started looking through everything through that lens, it just got exhausting, and people that knew my work knew like my big thing was to keep it right down the middle. Cause I've seen what can happen when you let a paper get leaning one way, left or right. I mean, it's just when you lose that trust of your audience. And so despite spending all this effort to say, hey, no, we're not writing anything based on politics. We're just trying to do our best to stay down the middle. Like, every story got looked through that lens. And this, I don't know. And then we would publish all these campaign letters, and our thing was, we'll run every letter because we won't leave anyone out. But what did that mean, Christina? It meant like I had to read thousands of letters. And it was just like, it just got to be so much. So the political side of it, I'll admit, I mean, wasn't the main reason. It was a small factor.
But there was a turn. I mean, again, another shift, a major divisiveness, sadly, in the country. And that, I think, I could imagine how that it would impact just the energy that you're putting into everything, and how it just changed how people were looking at, there had to be it had to be more black and white than maybe in prior years.
Yeah, I just it got to be exhausting, because I mean, people that have followed me will know, like, depending on the year, I was either a wild conservative or a crazy liberal. I mean, it just got to be like, I stopped enjoying that. So all those factors, and then I turned 40 and was like, is there more to life than this journalism thing? I had felt like it was my calling and was all that I would ever do. And I think that's why people were so shocked. But the truth is, I got to know Sean and Amber at 507, especially Sean during COVID. Just fell in love with his passion for the community and their vision for the coffee shop. And when he became a friend of mine. And so when I was telling him I was grappling with leaving the Acorn, what would I do? He was just amazing. He said, why don't you come work for me? We're opening a new shop on the Boulevard. The community. We trust you. We love you. And I'm like, I would say, I was never a waitress. I was a waiter. I was never worked at any food services at all in my life. I've only been a journalist. So
you're like, this, right?
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to get someone who's like an expert in opening new restaurants or something like that. Like, I could not talk them out of it. And them, like they run a business for all the right reasons. And so it was almost, as weird as it sounds, it felt like the Acorn again, in that, we were just coming and not just worried about the bottom line, but how we can impact the community, how we can reach more people. And so, as crazy as it was, I said, let's go, let's give it a go. And it was, again, I'll always be grateful for them for giving me that landing spot, because I don't know how I would have pulled myself away. It was not easy. And there was a lot of people like Drew that said, what are you doing? Like, you're in this place of influence and you're giving all that up. And I just said, that's just not important to me anymore. I enjoyed that. It was a real honor that people respected and cared about what I said. But again, going back to becoming a Christian, like, that wasn't how people looked at me and whether I was, respected and feared or whatever. That just wasn't important to me anymore. I just wanted to make a difference and be a positive influence. And so they gave me this role, and it was absolutely wonderful. And I've we can kind of, it's a little strange because I'm still with 507, even with my new role part-time, but I loved it. I learned, we opened up a place on the Boulevard. It was a great challenge, and now it's operating, and I go there almost every day, and I'm just proud to say I was a part of it. But that was just a small piece. I mean, that place is all about Sean and Amber and their amazing team and all of our baristas, and I'm kind of just the guy in the background.
Well, I love that. And, I could see the kind of through line in terms of still very community based. Obviously, 507, um, that's what they stand for and mean a lot to the community too, which is important. How did it feel though, kind of being on the side of like the businesses you used to cover, or did you have, because of your very deep knowledge of how the city works, did that give you any sort of, what's the word, advantages in helping them open that new location?
No, that's a great point. I think that came into the factors. Like, obviously, I knew when I had to go for a permit, whether it was the county or the city to open a new business, I knew exactly who to go to. Not to say I don't want to suggest I got any special favors, but, I knew where to call. I knew if something wasn't going right, who I could reach out to potentially figure that out and navigate that. And then certainly, just in marketing and getting the word out there about 507 events or the opening of a new shop, I had a platform already to help it to do that. So it didn't hurt, all those community connections. Every once in a while, though, I would run into one of those people maybe I had offended, and they could kind of tell me what it was because I didn't have that former role. So it's a double-edged sword. I mean, mainly a benefit, but every once in a while, the nature of being a local journalist is sometimes you're going to upset people by putting out stories that they don't want the public to know about. So there's some of that, but that's just a very small amount. Most people, and when they still see me, oh, Kyle from the Acorn, like it's, and Sean and Amber get that. Like people are always going to associate me with the paper. I was there for so long and was such like a visible spokesperson for it. So that continues, and that's never going to stop. And 99% of the time, it's been a wonderful benefit in every role I've taken on since leaving the Acorn.
So you mentioned you're now working part-time for 507, and you're also the executive director at Hospice of the Conejo. Yes. Again, this is like a very interesting pivot, Kyle. I'm like so curious about it. What led you there?
So it's easy. I can't really fit myself in a box right now. So I was thinking about coming on the podcast, I was hoping the way that I could thread all this together. But I mean, the way I see it, like I said,
it doesn't need to be tied up in a bow. Okay. Hindsight is 2020, and I'm sure maybe you'll even listen back and be like, huh. But it's all just a journey. Yeah,
I mean, that's the great way to put it. Again, I had opened up the second location and was, again, happy. But I had this sense, like my value was only so much. Like putting in 40 hours a week suddenly at 507, it was hard to do. And it was hard to, take a salary and yet not and be struggling to find ways to fill my time. So I went to them and just said, hey, why don't if I look for a role that will allow me to just do the stuff you absolutely need me for, the critical jobs that I do, and you'll just have to pay me for that specific time. If I can find that role, would you guys be open to it? And again, they've been so incredible. And they said, absolutely. If you find something you're passionate about, we will support it 100%. So I kind of went looking to see what was out there. And I was actually the Center for Nonprofit Leadership is an amazing organization that Cal Lutheran supports. It's based in Oxnard, but it's through Cal Lutheran. I went there to kind of look to see what was out there in the nonprofit world, because while I was at 507, going back for a second, one of the big things that I did that I never expected to do, and just a total 507 thing, is they said, let's bring back this Thanksgiving 5K, this Turkey Day Dash, which I, of course, heard about because I worked at the paper. I'm not a runner. I don't know, I'd never actually participated in it. But Sean and Amber said, yeah, this is an amazing run they used to do on Thanksgiving, and it went away, and we want to bring it back. And I remember saying, like, what does this have to do with a coffee shop? But that was before I really understood what 507 was all about in terms of building community and being so much more than just a coffee shop. So in doing that, we brought back this race. I was kind of the point person to gather people together, get the race started up again, to go to the YMCA that had put it on for so many years and say, what can we do to bring it back? And I guess that experience, it was such a success and so rewarding. I said, well, maybe the nonprofit fundraising, could it work for me? So I went to that job site, and the first job that popped up, honest to God, I do feel like a higher power was at work, was this opening at Hospice of the Conejo for the executive director. And I knew what hospice did, and I knew, even though I didn't have like a personal story with it, necessarily. I knew the executive director because when I was at the Acorn, Susan Murata, she was at the Thousand Oaks Auto Mall, and there was this whole hoopla over. They wanted to put up a big sign, a billboard sign next to the freeway, and the community came out against it, and they ended up killing the project. But I'd worked with her a lot, so I reached out to her and just said, what does this job entail? What does it all involve? And she immediately said, Kyle, you would be perfect for this. And again, I was like, wait a second, I've never, haven't done budgets really. I haven't been in the nonprofit world. But she said, no. She said, this is a 48-year-old organization. It's set up financially, it's in great shape. They just need someone to tell their story. They need someone to be able to express what we do. And you know this community. And again, you're a storyteller. And as crazy as it sounds, like I was like, okay, this makes sense. I think I can do this. So just out of nowhere, this opportunity came up, and amazingly, I found the support from not only Susan, but then the board. And they decided to take a chance on me. Like it's been my whole career, is people just saying, okay, Kyle, we'll give you a shot at it. And I just take a lot of pride in like, I'll do whatever I can, what I need to learn, put in the hours to succeed. And a year in, I mean, I just feel like one, what an amazing organization I get to represent. And two, I'm doing a pretty decent job at it. Like I haven't gone completely off the rails. So far so good. Yeah.
I like that. See, I like that you can look back and acknowledge that it is, that you're enjoying it and that it's great. What can you just, I'm sure most people know about hospice, but what does Hospice of the Conejo do specifically?
I really appreciate that question, because the reality is that most people don't know. And that's kind of what's amazing. Even all these years later. So Hospice of the Conejo is a non-medical hospice. That's the first thing we always have to clear up. When people hear the word hospice, they have so many feelings around that and associations with that. Whether the doctors and nurses that cared for their loved one before they passed away, we're the non-medical side of that. So the organization was formed to provide basically social, emotional support for people at the end of their lives. So we have our core mission is we have a group of about 50 well-trained, amazing, compassionate volunteers, and we match them with people that have not only terminal illness, but any kind of life-limiting illness, Parkinson's, dementia, MS, anything that impacts their ability to lead a full life. Usually they're homebound, they can't leave for whatever reason, and they have a caregiver who's a family member taking care of them. We match them with a volunteer who will go out, whether to their private residence or if they're at assisted living, and visit with them 2 to 3 hours a week and just spend time with them and hear and listen to them, maybe play a game with them, take them out for coffee and just spend quality time. And sometimes they just hold their hand. I mean, some of our clients are non-responsive. They don't speak, and our volunteers just go and spend time with them. So it's just as part of end of life, I've learned so much. It entails so many different things, but we feel that need for people that, that otherwise they're homebound. They're only seeing one person, one or two people. They're not getting social interaction. And it also serves as respite for their because usually their caregiver, say it's a 75-year-old man and a 78-year-old woman, like it gives her a chance to leave the house and not worry about for those few hours that they know that they're cared for. They know they're getting good, compassionate care and people looking after them. But we don't give medicine. We don't do anything like that. It's literally just spending quality time with them. And our calling
that's
card.
incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it's really neat. It's a niche thing. But when people understand what we offer, like I think more and more people realize like, hey, I think my grandfather could benefit from that. I think my wife or my husband could benefit from just having someone that's going to go give them 100% attention, give them that dignity. Because let's admit, it can be trying to take care of someone who's got an illness or has dementia day in and day out. When our volunteers come, they're so excited to see them. They're happy. They enjoy that time with them. They feel it's a gift to spend that time with them. So it means so much, not only to our volunteers, but obviously to the patient and then to their loved ones to know that they're cared for. And then really quickly, our second part of what we do is grief support. So we facilitate every month about 50 bereavement groups, grief support groups. We host some of them at our offices on Hillcrest, but also at Senior Concerns and at the Global Center. And this is for people, obviously, that have lost a loved one. We have therapists on our payroll that facilitate the groups. And then for free, people can come and just be able to be with others that have lost a child, that have lost a spouse of many years, that have lost a close friend. We even have a group for someone that's lost a pet. And so we facilitate those groups as well. So I guess the core mission is all around kind of this end of life transition and being there for people before, during, and after. So that's in so many words.
I mean,
hospice.
what incredible mission. And yeah, I mean, it is wild as you get older and you realize as you get older that these things are starting to happen and you're sort of that other side of being a child too, where now you might be taking care of your parents and you see that stuff, or that's what I feel like you start seeing that now, at least at my age. And it's incredible that an organization is out there doing that and supporting the families and caretakers in that way. Can people volunteer? Do they go to the website to
Yeah.
be a part, or sign if somebody wants to sign up to receive the volunteer?
Yeah.
How does
So
that?
again, go to our hospiceoftheconejo.org. We have our number on there, or you can email us, reach out to any way. Again, we say we have a small but mighty staff. So it's about 3 part-time / full-time staff, and then the therapist. So, reach out. What we do, it is a process. There's an intake process. We want to find out what your situation is, learn about you, so then we can pair you with one of our volunteers. That's part of the reason we keep such a big stable, about 50 volunteers, because we don't want to just, if someone reaches out, we won't just say, here's another name on the list, we're going to pair you with them. We want to find someone that has shared interest, or there's something in common there. And it's often men with men and women with women, for obvious reasons. So that's very easy in terms of, if you think you could use our services, if you're hearing this now and you're like, maybe this would help. But just reach out, because so much of what we do is just as a resource center. We work closely with medical hospices, because a lot of times they're providing the medical care and our people are providing the social emotional support. We can also say, hey, if we can't help you, let's refer you to a trusted hospice, a trusted medical hospice, because
Mm.
just this week, there's a big story out of Los Angeles about all these basically bad actors in the hospice space that were busted, because there's money, unfortunately, in it, and there's a lot of bad actors. And so we can be there to kind of make sure, guide you through this process, what to expect in medical hospice and everything like that. So if we can't help you, we're going to make sure we get you with someone that can, whether it's skilled nursing or whether it's medical hospice. So that's a big part of what we do, is just take calls and then take people through this kind of really difficult, challenging, and confusing time, which is that period of when your loved one is no longer getting medical care, but now needs hospice care, and what all that entails. To be a volunteer, same thing. Go to the website, email, reach out. You can find me online anywhere. To be an actual legacy hospice volunteer, we have an 8-week training course. We usually do it in the spring and in the fall. Last one we did was in the fall. So it's pretty intensive. It's 1 hour for 8 weeks. I'm sorry, 4 hours in the afternoon for 8 weeks. But we do that because we want our volunteers. They're going to be going to private residences. We want them to be completely trained for everything they're going to encounter and understand about end-of-life care. But if you just want to help out of our fundraisers, or help on social media, or do a number of other things to benefit hospice, you can reach out, and we can take you as a volunteer at any time. So.
Amazing. Well, as I hear you speak and I think about the common thread, it's obviously people and community. It sounds like no matter where you've landed, those two kind of components are important to you, and being able to be a helping hand in bringing people together. So I don't
Yeah.
know if that is how you feel, but
No,
it
you summed
sounds
it up.
like that,
Yeah, you
and
summed it up well.
what, having lived now in the Conejo Valley for what, almost 2 decades?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. So when I started the Acorn, I was actually in the Woodland Hills. So when did
Okay.
I moved to Agora? Yeah, no, it has been 20 years now. Yeah,
Okay.
so the last 10 in Thousand Oaks, and then 10 before that are in Agora. So yeah.
Got it. And, knowing it so intimately, especially during your work with the Acorn, like, do you think it's still a good place to live? Would you encourage people to come out here, start businesses?
Oh my gosh. I
Raise-
mean, and I'll just say, like, and I don't want to save this for the end. Like, I'm so impressed with what you're doing in this whole podcast. And when I saw that someone was doing this, I said, what a great idea. Because, again, as we talked about, there's not enough media. I don't know if you consider yourself media. I certainly do.
Yeah.
There's so many great local stories to be told, that I'm just glad that there's a platform like this, and all the people that you give a chance to share their stories. So, absolutely. I mean, I've been here now, and I can't imagine leaving. And I didn't grow up out here, so it's not like I just I find this community to be extremely unique, and you've heard it all before. I mean, it just has got, it's a city now. People will call it a town, but I mean, it's 100,000 people, and the Conejo Valley is probably 150,000 people. And if you think about my town in Wyoming of 3,000, like they see this as a giant city, but you get it. Like it feels like a small town. People know each other. You run into people, in the grocery store. I can't go to Costco anytime without running into somebody. So that whole feeling of like we care and we're engaged is really amazing. And so that I think is special. Obviously, everything you hear about the trails and the outdoors and the open space and the weather is all true, but there is something really unique in terms of just the people here. And I've seen that in every stop that I've made. When I was covering sports, whether it was the parents giving their time and money and effort to help their student athletes excel and have these amazing experiences, to seeing the local official, people like Drew, that they're not getting rich at this. They're doing this because they care about their communities. They're putting in long hours to have Kyle write mean-spirited tweets about them in the middle of the meeting because their tie is disheveled or something. I mean, they just care.
Oh, Kyle.
And then so that was one of my favorite things. I was like the keeper of the dress code of all the public meetings, because I would sit there and I'd record it literally with my phone, and I have some great stories about people wearing sunglasses. And so, yeah, they would do all these things. And then just to the residents, I mean, the reason a paper like the Acorn thrives, and the reason like why your podcast is able to be successful, is people care. I mean, it seems obvious, but there's plenty of places that there's so many distractions, whether it's national issues, state issues, that keep people's attention, and they just don't have time for what's local. And I mean, is it guaranteed it will be like that forever? No. And I sadly see it starting to trend away from that. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the media presence has been reduced. But while we have it now, it's such a special place where people still care about that lone oak tree or that one lone business that's been around for 100 years. Like people will stand up and fight and care because they care about this community. And that makes it really unique. At least for me, I love that about Thousand Oaks, the Conejo Valley. Even though I pulled away now, and anytime someone tries to rope me in on some like, Kyle, get behind this issue or this candidate, I'm like, no. And maybe that day will come. Maybe that day will come. But right now, like I have a nonprofit. That's what gets my time and attention. But that's the fact that people care enough about these local issues is definitely unique and special.
Or what would be your vision for Thousand Oaks or for the Conejo Valley, more broadly speaking? What's your vision for it?
Yeah, I mean, I hope, I still have many friends over at the Acorn, and I still root for them because of the people there, not necessarily because of the ownership now. But I would love one day, I do believe someone's going to come along that has the resources and the background to create a hyper-local news website. Like you said, print is so expensive. So I know there's a lot of people that love to pick up the paper. And I would always say, like, that's when people would laugh. And I would talk to people my age saying, people read the newspaper. And I would say, yes. In Thousand Oaks, yes. And I would know that because when the paper didn't show up, I would get calls and calls and calls. But my vision for the future is that, I hope that somebody will come along and create something hyper local that's online 24/7, maybe not 24/7, but daily updates that will give us the coverage of all of these different government bodies that we deserve, because we're blessed to be an affluent community that can support something like that. So I hope that for the Conejo Valley. I know this housing issue. I don't know how much you've delved into it in your podcast, but it's very derisive, and I guess maybe it was all those years at the Acorn writing about trees. I mean, I'm a little more measured in saying that, of course, I'm all for affordable housing and allowing people that want to buy a home here to have a home. And if that requires more building, I understand that. But yes, I am still in that old school camp of someone that, I don't want to see skyscrapers in Thousand Oaks. I don't want to see tall buildings that block our views of the mountains. I don't want to see open space developed on. So I just envision a community that grows in a way that, again, hopefully holds to these values that we've always had and our appreciation for open space and that small town feel. But it grows in such a way that we're diverse, that people of all income levels can find a home here, because I know that's absolutely not the case. And barring a miracle, that wasn't going to be the case for me. That's for another podcast altogether. I was lucky to be able to get a home here because that is a big issue. But I would like to see we would grow without losing, a lot that we hold dear to. and we would have, again, room for several podcasts and different media outlets and all these things, because they just enhance our way of life. I think that we're so blessed to live in a place that can support hospice of the Conejo, that we can have volunteers that can be there for our loved ones as they age and as they approach that transition. And that's the way I felt about the Acorn and a place like 507. Like, we're so blessed that we support these things. So my hope is just that we continue to do that, but then grow in a way that's responsible and allows more people to enjoy this, that we don't have this feeling like, no, we have it, now we don't want anyone else to have it. I definitely, I don't support that.
Makes sense. I like it. Okay, I've got three. I know I've taken a lot of your time. I really appreciate it. I've got three quick fire questions for you. Okay, what is your favorite thing to do in the Conejo Valley?
My favorite thing to do in the Conejo Valley, I'm a big fan of Tarantula Hill. I mean, bring some friends out there to sit around one of those tables, have a beer, watch a football game. I just love that place since it's opened. Again, it's a place I've run into people, so I love getting together with friends. I'm a big foodie, so I go out to eat all the time. Although I have my select few places, I'm a Topper's pizza guy. I'll say that. So I think that's my favorite thing. I mean, given the cliche, I live off Lynn and I'm right by Tarantula Hill. So I take such joy on a Saturday to take my two dogs, throw them on their leashes, take them up that hill and just kind of look at our city. Definitely one of the favorite things that I like to do. And it's like right by my house. So it's a must.
Now you've sort of teed me up. What are your favorite restaurants? We've got Toppers, which I'm dying to interview the original founders. I love that story. Do you have a favorite restaurant? Maybe a favorite dinner restaurant?
I cannot say enough, and you probably hear this a lot now. And I think you've had the owners on. Basta, since it's come to Thousand Oaks, is just unbelievable. I mean, I just think I used to go there in Agora. It was right by my opposite the Acorn. I mean, I think we're so blessed to have a place like that to go to and eat. I go there quite a bit. Like I said, Toppers I love for the pizza. Obviously 507 for your coffee.
Yeah, you got to do that. And so Boulevard or Arblaze?
Okay, so that's kind of an unfair question, because if you're like a true coffee person, coffee snob, like you can't beat the Boulevard because it's all about focused on coffee. But yeah, if you want to have a full lunch and get that amazing avocado toast, which was one of the first things that I fell in love with at 507, you got to go to Arblaze. I mean, you've got to go there first. If you just need that cup of coffee, that great latte, like you can't beat just pulling up to the Boulevard, parking, running in. I was always that guy that was on the go. I wasn't that. So many people spend their entire days at 507 and they embrace that. But I was always the guy, like, give me my coffee. I have a deadline to finish up. And we fulfill both those needs if you have to run and go. But 507 on the Boulevard is just great for that. If you just want to grab a drink, see a smiling face and go.
Last question for you. And, I usually ask, what's your piece of advice for an entrepreneur? But maybe what's, your piece of advice for somebody who's living out in the Conejo Valley and wants to be involved, like wants to take a step into further connecting to this place we call home?
I mean, there's so many ways. The chamber is really great. I know it's a little business focused, but they do so many networking events, and you have our business people tend to be a lot of people that are plugged in politically as well into the nonprofit world, and all these different ways to help. That's a great place to start. Just don't hesitate to reach out. There's so many amazing organizations that are looking for a helping hand. I see it because I show up at a lot of the Kiwanis meetings and the Rotary meetings. I mean, the reality is, if you look at the makeup of those clubs, like, it's sad. They're trending so much older because they need an infusion of, they laid this groundwork of like, let's get involved, let's help, let's give back. So especially if you're a younger person, maybe not 20s, but 30s or 40s, like, reach out to one of these clubs. Like, they're some of the funniest people you will ever meet. They have such a great sense of humor, and they can plug you in so many different ways. Not only business wise, but just how to give back and how to contribute and have that servant's heart. And we see that, I see that with all the clubs. And I'll have to say, whether it's your house of faith, it's a church, it's a temple. We've got a great faith community here. So many wonderful churches, so many temples, a mosque. If you thought about it, or you come here and you had another church, like, go and reach out. This is such a great way. These are communities that aren't just a place to worship, but so many of them are out trying to actually do the work that's spelled out and give back and make a difference. So I would just, if I could put a plug in for your local church to get involved and go out, it's a great way to bring your family out, and then also, just find a way to plug in and give back.
Amazing. Kyle, thank you for sharing your amazing journey, all the sort of insights you were able to glean over your 2 decades out here, and especially within the local media outlet. It's really cool. And to be able to continue to find ways to bring this community to life is really special. So thank you for being on the podcast.
I really appreciate this. I said this right before we went on, that I tell everybody that when they say, that's Kyle from the Acorn, I say, well, I used to be a big deal. Now this made me feel like I was a big deal again for an hour.
You know what? You are, and it'll live on. And
very much. So thank you for the opportunity.
Of course.
Next time I'll be a little better prepared with my background, and now everyone's seeing those dishes I haven't got done yet.
No, well, and I'm getting sun in my face. We have to, but maybe I imagine when you had your podcast, it was not video based yet. And now that everything has to be on video, it just causes a lot of additional things to consider. So
enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Conejo Valley Visionaries. If you like today's episode, make sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to rate and review us. That's the best way to support the podcast. To enter our giveaways, learn about local events, and to find out more about each guest, follow @Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram. If you want to share your visionary story on the podcast, send us an email. We are always open to guest nominations. Email ConejoValleyVisionaries@gmail.com. This episode was produced by Christina Denstead and Justin K. Sloan. Conejo Valley Visionaries is edited by Justin K. Sloan and J. Sloan Productions.